The honourable member of Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, when it comes to being accountable to Albertans about the safety of our most vulnerable children, this government has moved the goalposts so often it took a 4-year legal battle to start to get the picture. The long and the short of it is this. By playing around with reporting criteria, this PC government is hiding almost 2/3 of the deaths suffered by vulnerable children receiving protective services in Alberta. So to the Premier, even today, you only report child deaths in care and not child deaths in protective services. How can Albertans possibly trust you?
Mr. Speaker, this Progressive Conservative government, which started in October of 2012, took as one of its first steps making a child advocate an independent officer of this legislature. And, Mr. Speaker, we did that because I worked in the family justice system, and I worked in child welfare, and I am a concerned Albertan just as every other citizen is. We must protect our children, Mr. Speaker, and by ensuring that we have an independent child advocate and we have reporting requirements in place and that we take a look at every tragic situation, that is how we get the outcomes that we need, which is to protect.
Thank you. Honourable member.
Mr. Speaker, given that the 10 deaths of children in care last year generated not one investigation by the government's internal Quality Assurance Council, and so far only 2 by the Children's Advocate, and given that this government appears to be combining a policy of under-reporting child fatalities with a growing practice of under-investigating them, does the Premier really believe that increasing secrecy and decreasing accountability can result in anything other than less safety and less security for Alberta's most vulnerable children?
Mr. Speaker, what the honourable member has just said is fundamentally inaccurate. Every serious injury and death of a child is reported to the Quality Assurance Council, which was set up by my predecessor, the member for Calgary Cross. Everyone. Every death and serious injury is reported to the Child and Youth Advocate. Those 2 bodies work to determine what the most appropriate investigation should be undertaken to determine whether or not there's something that needs to be learned from or some corrective action to be taken. That is how fundamentally happens. The Medical Examiner's Office also has the death of every child in care reported to that office to determine whether an investigation should happen. So it's not one investigation, Mr. Speaker, it's 3.
Honourable member.
Well, Mr. Speaker, having a death reported to you is not the same as doing an investigation about how that death happened and how it can be stopped. And the fact of the matter is that the Children's Advocate has done 2 reports so far. It's just not good enough. Will the Premier commit today to legislation that requires the Children's Advocate to prepare a public review of every death of every child receiving protective services in this province?
Mr. Speaker, the reason why you have independent officers of the legislature, the reason why we have a Quality Assurance Council is to determine whether a review, an in-depth analysis, an inquiry is necessary. And the same with the Medical Examiner's Office. Not every death in the province goes to a fatality review. The Medical Examiner's Office reviews it, determines whether a recommendation should go to the board, determine whether there's something that they do not know about that death. That's the way these circumstances are handled in this province, Mr. Speaker. They look to see whether a further investigation is needed or warranted. And when it is needed or warranted, then they perform that review.